Hello, this is a beginner guide to learn the Italian game with the white pieces. This is perfect if you are trying to learn the Italian opening for the very first time and want a quick way to learn it so you can just start playing games as quickly as possible and get consistently good positions in the opening. Now, why should you learn the Italian? Well, the Italian opening has very repeatable game plans and very simple ideas. And it also requires that you don't have to memorize moves in specific orders. You just have to memorize ideas, which will help you find the moves more consistently and help you win a lot of games without having to memorize a million moves of theory. The Italian can also be played at the beginner level all the way up until the highest level of games, which means it's perfect to learn as a beginner, but also to keep learning and master throughout the rest of your chess career. Now, before I go into the actual Italian opening, I think it's just real nice to quickly go through what some of the sidelines you might see are. On move 1, after e4, you might see moves such as d5, known as the Scandinavian defense. You might see c5, known as the Sicilian defense. There are moves such as knight to f6 and knight to c6. All of these are different openings and would require separate videos. On move 2, after we play knight to f3, there are sidelines such as d6, the Philidor defense, knight to f6, known as the Russian defense or Petrov's defense, and some other weird moves, but those again would require separate videos. But we'll continue with the main line, knight to c6, defending the e-pawn, and we play bishop to c4, eyeing the f7 square, eyeing the d5 square, and that is the starting position of the Italian game. Let me know in the comments if this is the first opening you've ever learned, or if not, what was the first opening you've ever tried to learn? I'd love to know. Now, our main game plan in the Italian game is we want to play the moves c3 and d4. Our goal is to try to win by dominating the center and then winning through the center with more space. One quick question to go over is, why do we play pawn to c3 instead of knight to c3? Well, for example, after bishop to c5, this position is just very symmetrical, and it's just hard to play for an advantage from here. So the better move, if we want to play for an advantage here, would be pawn to c3. Before I go into that, it's really important to actually go over move 4, because in this position for black, there's only two good moves, bishop to c5 and knight to f6. And for those two moves, we'll have to respond differently. But a quick way to remember which move we have to play is, after black plays, can we play c3 safely? For example, after bishop to c5, yes, we can play pawn to c3 safely. However, after knight to f6, we cannot play c3 safely because our e-pawn is hanging. So we would have to play, what I recommend is d3, defending our e-pawn. The fried liver attack is an option, but I will cover that in a separate video, and it is out of scope for the scope of this video. And typically, the moves bishop to c5 and knight to f6 are played one after the other, and our responses are the same in either order. So for example, bishop c5, c3, knight f6, and d3. Or the other move order, knight f6, our e-pawn is attacked, so we play d3, bishop c5, and c3. Now, before we continue with the main line, I think it's really important to go through some of the mistakes that black can play out of the opening. So for example, in this position, one mistake that could be played is the immediate d6, trying to get the bishop out. If we ask our question on move 4, can we safely play c3? The answer is yes, we will play c3. And one move you might see here a lot is the move bishop to g4, trying to pin our knight to our queen. And here you have a really nice resource. One of the reasons we played pawn to c3 is we have this move queen to b3, creating a double attack on both the b7 and f7 pawn, and black has a hard time defending both. Another example of a mistake we might see is if black plays something that's just too slow, such as h6 in this position. And what we can do is on every move, we can ask ourselves, like on move 4 where we ask, can we safely play c3? We now have to ask, can we safely play d4? In this position, the answer to that is yes. There's no pressure on our e-pawn, so we can immediately play d4. And for example, after takes, and the bishop moves away, we will have this nice lead in development, a big center, more space, and white already has an advantage right away out of the opening. Another example of a mistake would be d6 instead. And once again, we ask ourselves the question, can we play d4 right away? Again, our e-pawn is not attacked, so the answer is yes. And this will look similar to the last position I showed, where again, we have a space development and center advantage. So on every move, we know we have to ask ourselves, can we play c3 and can we play d4 safely? The main line move here is knight to f6, immediately attacking our e-pawn, and therefore we must defend with the d-pawn d3. Now, our middle game plan is we're going to develop our pieces and play d4 on our terms when we are ready. To show examples of where we might develop our pieces, I'll just show an example position. So say after castles, d6. Now, in this position, they could pin our knight with the bishop. So it's actually useful to get in the move h3 to take care of the g4 square. And let's say, for example, they play something pretty passive. You might ask yourself, where are we going to put this knight? Because the c3 square is taken away. Well, one plan we actually have to develop this piece is to play rook to e1, which is multi-purpose because we defend our e-pawn, but also, for example, we free up the f1 square for our knight. And for example, again, let's say something like this. This is where we can put the other knight. But again, the game plan in this opening is when we are ready, and when we are ready alone, we will be playing d4. So just to quickly go through the overview all the way back to the beginning. After e4, e5, we play knight f3, putting pressure on the e-pawn. They respond knight c6, defending it. And after bishop to c4, we start asking ourselves, can we play c3 safely? Once we play c3, we then have to ask ourselves, can we play d4 safely? And mistakes that don't immediately put pressure on our e-pawn will allow us to play d4 right away. If they correctly attack our e-pawn, we defend it with d3, and then we will just slowly develop until we are ready, keeping in mind that we don't want our knight to get pinned. And after some developing moves, we just want to remember we want our rook on e1, eventually putting our knight on g3, and we will play d4 when we are ready. But yeah, I think that is a perfect way to wrap up the beginner guide on the Italian opening. Let me know in the comments if you have any extra questions, and I will, if desired, I will create a more intermediate guide on the Italian that can be seen as a step 2 progression to continue off this video. But this should be a perfect launching off point to start playing your first games with the Italian and start getting nice positions out of the first 6 or 7 moves. If this video helped you out, feel free to let me know in the comments and also subscribe. Both would help me out greatly. And have a great rest of your day, and good luck in your games. Thank you.